Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast, The Briefing Room. This week is all around, it's in the cybersecurity space, and it's about secure by design. Am I secure? Are you secure? Is it for large organizations? Is it for smaller companies? Is it for individuals? Is it a guide or a checklist of things to cover? Or is it a piece of software that you install on a computer? Who knows? I don't know. One person who I hope does know is with me today, Colin Williams. Colin, hello.
Hello.
Would you like to give a brief overview of yourself and how you've ended up here and why you're here to talk about secure by design?
My name is Dr. Colin Williams. I'm a principal consultant at CDS Defence and Security. I've been thinking about and doing what we now call cybersecurity for, the best part of 3 decades. Started in 1995. During the course of those 3 decades, a great deal has changed and a great deal has stayed the same. And during the course of those 3 decades, I've built systems, I've architected systems, I've helped buy systems, I've helped sell systems, I've been part of the process by which systems have been accredited in formal security terms, which we'll come on to, and I've also helped people go through the process of accrediting systems. I've consulted on policy, I've written policy, implemented it. So when it comes to the history of this stuff, I know where the skeletons are buried, let's say.
Plenty of experience then in this field. We hear the phrase, I've heard the phrase secure by design in terms of like MOD quite a lot lately. What exactly is secure by design?
In a sense, the first place to start is perhaps to explain what secure by design isn't,
okay,
and to explain what it replaces.
Okay.
So secure by design is a set of principles and practices that are intended to ensure that systems are put together, operated, monitored, managed, configured, whatever you like, in a way that ensures that they do what they're supposed to do. Okay. We'll come back to that because that's really rather important. It replaces an older way of doing things, which has existed quite literally for decades, is a generational construct. And the older way of doing things was really rather prescriptive. And the center point of the old way of doing things was the episode of what was called accreditation with a capital A, a formal process. So what we're talking about here is something which is, in this incarnation, quite MOD specific. There were versions of this that were deployed across pretty much the whole of central government, certainly, but this is, in a way, largely in this flavor, in this form, specific to the MOD. So let's say a contractor, a supplier, would be in receipt of a contract from the Ministry of Defence that would require them to hold and to process and to store information on behalf of their customer.
Okay.
The contract would specify perhaps certain attributes or criteria that the system would need to possess. And in any case, there'd be existing policy and standards and so forth. The supplier would then supposedly implement these standards and criteria, fulfill these criteria. And along the way, or rather as a crucial episode in that process, they'd produce a thing called, it used to be called the accreditation document set. And then it was called the risk management accreditation document set, in an effort to try and slim down the, quite literally, reams of paper that were getting delivered. The idea was that these documents would then be scrutinized by an MOD accreditor, who would then inspect the system, satisfy themselves that the requisite stuff had been done, they would then issue a certificate, quite literally an accreditation certificate that would authorize the system into operation. That model itself derived from an earlier reality in which computers and computing looked an awful lot different to the way they look now.
Right.
And to an earlier reality in which the contractual relationships between suppliers and the MOD looked a great deal different to the landscape that we currently inhabit. So kind of the genesis of this old accreditation model was a world in which computers, and it goes back to the Cold War, essentially.
Right, okay.
A world in which computers were huge things that filled entire rooms, when they were largely the preserve of nation states and then largely the preserve of the defense and intelligence operations inside those nation states, when the organizations, enterprises that built computers were relatively small in number. And even back to the days when computers themselves were still quite temperamental, flaky, borderline experimental. So these were highly sensitive, incredibly expensive, often quite delicate things. And you were therefore in a world in which you knew a great deal about the people who were building them, and you could know a great deal about the systems, and you didn't connect them to other systems except under tightly controlled circumstances and so on and so forth. So you can see how that world lent itself very easily to this kind of modality where you documented everything and you presented the documents to the MOD in this case, and yada yada. You can also see how, if you fast forward to today, that model makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
No.
And in fact, it hasn't made any sense for, well, at least the last 10 years in reality.
Yeah.
The world has changed. Systems have changed. The supply community has changed. The whole landscape has changed. Now, in reality also, what happened, particularly across the span of, well, certainly the last 10 years, was that the pressure on the system grew enormously. So there was no way that the MOD could satisfy the demand for accreditors and accreditation. So you ended up with systems that could, in reality, go for their entire life cycle without actually being visited by an accreditor, which kind of made the system a bit tokenistic, shall we say. Polite word, perhaps. But it also introduced, or rather reinforced, practices that, whilst they belong to the earlier world, as in this earlier world, if you got a computer working, you tended not to change its configuration for obvious reasons. Yeah. Again, fast forward to today, on what planet would you suggest that not patching a system is a pathway to good security? Right, you wouldn't do it. No. Actually, the ability to change a system is now central to what we would call the security of the system, certainly to the resilience of the system. Yeah. The accreditation model, because it locked systems in a static state, and made them incredibly resistant to change because you had to go through the reaccreditation model and all the latency and cost and overhead that imposed, actually ended up mitigating against good security. It was clear that we needed a way of doing this thing called security, and we'll come back to that question again, that was just more responsive, more agile, more flexible. So, first part of the answer to the question is, secure by design is none of that stuff.
Okay.
Right. Secure accreditation's gone.
Right.
It's finished. Over. Had its day. What does that mean? Well, it means, in a sense, and this is one of the ironies of the situation, as in people can get quite excited about the novelty of secure by design. Right. Actually, in many ways, it's not novel at all. It's exactly what we've said we should be doing all along. It's about thinking about the stuff that you need to think about at the beginning of the life cycle of the system, literally at the design phase.
Okay.
It's then about building all of those considerations in, not just to the design of the system, but to the implementation of the system, the operation of the system, the management of the system, the governance of the system.
Okay. So it's throughout then.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Now, actually, we've been saying that you should do this for any number of, pick a number, any number of years. So at the end of the exercise, from one vector, or rather not at the end of the exercise, but at a relatively early stage in the design process, from one vector, for sure you're going to start to identify countermeasures and controls that you might wish to apply to the system.
Okay.
So in that sense, absolutely no change. What are the controls? Well, they're going to depend on the nature of the system. Kind of no change there, or there shouldn't have been.
Okay.
Which control set might you choose? Well, the control set that makes most sense for the thing that you're building. Shouldn't be any change there. How do you select the controls? Well, you ask yourself a bunch of questions at the start of the exercise. And you work through the answers to those questions, and then you figure out what you need to do to make sure that the system does what you want it to do.
Okay. So what would be your, I asked Andy this last time in that podcast, is what would be your 30-second, if I'm your 30-second elevator pitch, if I'm high value client that you want to try and get, walking in the elevator, going up 4 floors, you've got 30 seconds to try and tell me why I should think about secure by design or implement secure by design, if I haven't thought about it already.
Because it's a method whereby you can identify the things that you need to do and the things that you need to keep on doing through the life cycle of the system in order to make sure that the system does whatever it is that you or your customer or your relying party want that system to do in the way that you want it to do it.
Okay. So is it a set of standards, a mindset, or a process? It's basically, is it like the sort of like commandments then? It's the what you should follow from what I gather from what you've said with computers were massive, whole rooms dedicated to just a computer. When did that change sort of happen? Secure by design, did that sort of replace it quite lately? But then you said the technology's been
so
rapidly.
the conversations that have led us to the point of this initiative, this program, this phenomenon called Secure by Design have been going on for some considerable period of time. The instantiation of this as a more formal MOD initiative is a couple of years old, effectively. It's like a handful of years old. But the underlying imperatives that have been driving these conversations and these transitions, well, they've been at play for some considerable period of time. But because the MOD, not uniquely, but particularly perhaps even in the central government landscape, is a not untypically inert organisation, and the supply base is similarly configured, it takes time for these ideas to root and for these transitions to occur. And still, it's the case that we are in the not the grip of, but we're still in the realm of the older contracts that were configured according to the old methods and so on and so forth. But to the question about what it is, okay. Secure by design is not a standard, if you mean by standard a capital S.
Okay.
It most definitely is a mindset,
Right.
and it is most definitely a set of principles and practices that are to be implemented. So, to give you another version of the elevator pitch, you start this secure by design journey with a bunch of questions.
Okay.
What is this system? What does it do? What context does it operate in? What do I mean by context? Well, that depends on the system.
Okay.
That could be the geography, it could be the geopolitics, it could be the physical nature of the system, it could be the business processes that it satisfies, whatever the context is.
Yeah.
Suggested by the nature of the requirement and the system and so forth. Is it hosted in an environment which is itself protected behind wires with people with guns on the gate, or is it publicly facing, or there's a whole bunch of questions you're going to ask about the context. So that's business context, physical context, technical context, whatever. So you can see already this is not a free form exercise, but it's an exercise that's requiring a great deal of thought.
Okay.
And there's no kind of rules here. You're not following a checklist. Okay, so you're looking at the system, its nature, its context, its purpose and its functions. What do you want this thing to do? How do you need to build it to do whatever it is that you want it to do? Now, when you say you want it to do, this could be, it's my system and it's satisfying my requirements, or this could be, I have a customer and they have a bunch of requirements and I want this system to satisfy their requirements because I want them to pay me. That's part of what the system does. Part of what the system does, it could be that it holds classified data. That's whatever. That's all part of what is the system? What does it do? Why do I want it to do what I want it to do?
Okay.
So you're building an analysis piece here, which we said we should do all along back in the day. This is not new, or it shouldn't be new. Okay, so now because we're in the context of the MOD and we're in the context of systems that may contain classified and other valuable data, we're now in the realm of who might want to get into this system, who might want to stop this system operating, who might want to give us a headache.
Yeah.
If they succeed, how much of a headache are we going to have, we being me and the people who rely on this system? Minor embarrassment, catastrophic failure, serious degradation to operational capability, whatever, there's a spectrum there. What do I know broadly about the people who are going to attempt to give us a bad day? Because we're dealing with cybersecurity, therefore we're dealing with our concept of risk, which is distinct to hazard. So hazard is the adverse outcome that occurs, or the cause of an adverse outcome, which is external, as in it's non-human, as in it's fire, flood, earthquake, whatever. Yeah. In our world, component of our risk calculus is threat, which is an actor, a human, or well, increasingly maybe artificial intelligence, but that's a different podcast. But that's an agent.
Yeah, there's a bad actor
with agency who wishes to do us harm, and there you're interested in the capability and the intent. So now you start to think about who's going to try and ruin. Then you start to think about, okay, what do I need to put in place to make sure that the system does what I want it to do, in the way that I want it to do it, at the time I want it to do it, that it withstands knocks and bumps and just the ordinary wear and tear of systems in the world. But also, what do I need to do to make sure that it can withstand, deter, detect, prevent, whatever the adversary? As a consequence, I won't say at the end of, because there isn't an end to this process, as a consequence of all of that, assuming you were doing this at the initial design phase of the system before it's gone live, you end up with a picture. And you're starting to end up then with an idea of the things you're going to do, the way you're going to design it, the countermeasures you're going to put in, the backup provisions, the confidentiality, the crypto, whatever it might be. And then the way in which you might express those in the sense of formal control. So I've looked at all of this stuff and I've decided that we need to do this, don't do this, whatever. And there's a bunch of controls over here, and these controls make sense to me, and therefore these are the ones that I think I'm going to apply to this system because... And this is the crucial point, because I have some idea about why I'm doing this. Why am I spending the money, taking the time, applying these controls, possibly degrading some of the capability of the system to do that because there's a trade-off?
Yeah.
Well, because I have a reasonably good idea that by doing this, this, and this, and this, I'm going to achieve these outcomes. Now, what Secure by Design then says, as a set of principles, is that you continually iterate this analysis process through the life of the system because, of course, things change.
Okay. So my reaction to that then would be, you're doing all this work at the start, you're doing all the analysis. That's just going to delay my project. That's going to add some cost at the start as well. Do I really need to do these? Does the delay in the project and cost now outweigh the benefits of if something happened in the future? I might not be thinking, no one's going to try and get into my systems, or I believe my people are good enough that no one's going to be able to get into their systems. How would you change my thinking of why do I need to spend the cost and the time now?
So part of what secured by design was intended to fix, and if it's implemented properly, it will fix, was, to a certain extent still is, the phenomenon whereby, because of the dynamics of the contracting process, there tended to be this business of the lowest price technically compliant bid won stuff.
Right.
That never made terribly much sense when the formal evaluation criteria was supposed to be value for money, because value for money is a different proposition to lowest price technically compliant bid. In those contexts, it was not uncommon for the real security requirements of the system to be, in a sense, abstracted out of the bid process. And the bid process simply reflected the stipulations in contract. And when it became inevitably apparent that the real security concerns hadn't been addressed at the earliest stages of the design of the system, let alone the negotiation of the contract, well, then you ended up with significant overhead or potentially delay to the project as these things were brought into the picture at the last minute. So part of the answer is, let's learn the lessons of our history, and let's not design systems believing that security is an afterthought, and then get to the point of initialization, and in whatever mechanism you're using, accreditation or secure by design or whatever, somebody looks at the system and says, I'm not accepting that into service because you haven't done this, this, and this.
Right, okay.
And now you've got a significant cost overhead and you've got a significant delay, which you wouldn't have had if you had addressed this earlier. But more substantively, take an analog from real life. You're going to set off on a journey, major holiday. You've got your entire family and you're going to a part of the world that you've never been to before.
Yeah.
You're not going to plan a single thing. You're not going to book any hotels. You're not going to use maps. What would happen? Total chaos.
I have a breakdown, yeah.
Yes, and it would cost you a fortune.
Yeah.
Same deal.
Okay.
You're building a system which is going to do something significant. Otherwise, what on earth are you building the system for, or operating the system? So you want it to achieve some outcomes, give you some capability, whatever. That must be important. Okay. On what planet does it make sense to design that system without thinking about the ways in which you might want to prevent it going wrong?
Yeah. Going back to your example of not accepting that piece of equipment because you haven't done secure by design or got those things in place, then you've got to go back and do the costing and apply that, and then make sure everything's up to where it should be. And then if it finds a flaw, then you've got to go back and actually pay to redo that bit. That
absolute craziness. Absolute. Oh, look, I've built a house. Oh, you wanted a window in that wall. Oh, I can give you a window, but it's going to cost you 10 times as much now to knock a hole in the wall as it would have done if I built the window in the first place. Now, so what we're talking about is factoring in at the start of the process and throughout the life of the system a set of design attributes, behaviors, governance systems, whatever it is, because it can be a whole load of different things. It's not just technical controls. Okay. Which give you the peace of mind, insofar as you can ever have peace of mind about the operation of these complex systems, that the thing's going to do what you want it to do, which goes to, if you like, a deeper point here, which is looking with hindsight, this initiative should probably never have been called secure by design. Okay.
What should it be in?
I think the word resilience should have been in there more than security. Because, the word security itself is an artifact of the before times. Okay. The word security in the conventional triptych devolves into confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This model goes back to this older paradigm of computing. The Cold War, big computers filling entire rooms when you were really worried the Soviet Union was going to nick your secrets and the computer was so flaky it might fall apart. Okay. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are not requirements, but they're not the only requirements, nor will they necessarily be the most important requirements. There are certain systems where the function of the system can only be served if it actually shares information. That's what you want it to do. That is its fundamental purpose. You are the military, you're running a hearts and minds operation. You have information which is it's absolutely critical that the populace of the theatre in which you're operating gets in a timely fashion. Where's your confidentiality requirement? There isn't one. The purpose of your system is to get that information out in as timely a fashion as possible. You're interested in its availability, yes. You might be interested in its integrity, in that you might wish to stop an adversary from defacing the website that you're using to promulgate the information to the people you need to get it, but that's a different set of requirements. So what we're talking about here is, if you like, a more open-ended construct in which your concern is ensuring the capacity of the system that you are responsible for to do what you have determined you want that system to do. If that's keeping secret, that's what you want it to do. Okay. If it's communicating information to your allies and partners, that's what you want it to do. If it's being available as a fallback system that's there in case all of your other systems fail, that's what you want it to do.
Can you explain it like you're talking to someone brand new in cyber? So we have a new starter, walks up the stairs, very happy, walks down, sits next to you, and you've got to explain that he wants to start in, or she wants to start in cyber. Where's good to start in cyber? Oh, read Secure by Design. I might try that. Oh, Colin, what do you know about Secure by Design? How can I get started?
So,
without scaring them off.
Exactly. So what we don't have at the moment, and Nick's blessing we may never have, is that we don't have a Secure by Design handbook. We have lots and lots of materials that are available on various websites, and there's probably some benefit in amalgamating those things together. I would start this conversation with that apocryphal person by initially talking to them a little bit about cyber itself and about what they might think cyber is or isn't.
Okay.
Because that goes to some of the reasons for which we're doing this thing in the first place, and goes to some of the reasons for which there's been this transition. So, there is a notion of cyber abroad in the world, which is that cyber is essentially big networks. It's wire and tin, it's computers, and it's what we used to call computer networks, only just bigger and connected. Okay, there's an element of that. But cyber is, it's a socio-technical system, which means there's a social element, which means there's a sociological element. It's about humans and non-humans enmeshed in the same systems, interchanging, exchanging, performing some of the same functions as each other in these systems, all kind of centered around information and the flow of information, and information as the lifeblood of everything that we do. So to this apocryphal person, I would say what Secure by Design is about making sure that these systems of which you're a part, that you depend on for your daily existence, because this is your mobile telephone, this is the sat-nav in your car, this is the software build in your car, this is the system that underpins the mechanism by which you get paid, the system that underpins the mechanism by which blood gets from hospital to hospital, and which bread's on the shelves, and all the rest of it. It's about making sure these systems operate in a way that you need them to, and that the people who are responsible for them need them to. And it's a way of, therefore, figuring out what they need to do, how they need to do it, and how you need to safeguard, protect, shield, defend, make resilient these systems. So it's about making sure that systems operate as they should.
I kind of want to ask you what a life in a day of a Secure by Design person is.
It should be a day in the life of a let's still call them a cybersecurity. It should simply be the day in life of a cybersecurity professional. It shouldn't be any different to the way that we've been.
So it's not like a niche that you only do Secure by Design. Nope. You do a whole array of things inside cyber, and same as
can't do cybersecurity without doing Secure by Design. You can't call yourself a cybersecurity expert without doing Secure by Design.
Right. Okay. So it's like the fundamentals of.
It is absolutely.
Right, okay.
It is the basics of our profession, essentially, extrapolated into a model.
Yeah. So when did that change? Sort of. This is more of a history lesson. Then the question of when did that change? Sort of go from the old style of computing where it was just a tick box, Yeah, it's fine, to more of a, we're going to implement this now, because computers have been getting better and better and better. They're more advanced. So I imagine defense would have had that sort of computing technology before consumers.
So there are two questions there and two answers. The formalization of secure by design into a programmatic initiative. Well, that dates back a couple of years. So that was the brainchild of Christine Maxwell.
Okay.
But the transition in and to the broader computing environment, well, it actually dates back to 1995. That dates back to the beginning of the Windows revolution,
Right.
as it could probably quite fairly be characterized. So prior to the release of Windows 95, the roost had been ruled by the heavy metal bashers, as in the people who made large-scale computers that filled entire rooms and so on and so forth. I mean, there was some movement towards smaller scale computing environments, but still it was kind of that model.
Yeah.
Windows 95, by intent, blew that model away. I remember I was at an exhibition at Shrivenham, and I was talking to a guy who worked for Digital, which no longer exists, which tells you something about the outcome of this story.
Right.
And I not long started this game, and I'd seen on the news the queues of these people in America and elsewhere queuing overnight for Windows 95 and literally fighting each other to get hold of this stuff. And this guy was stood in front of this table that was groaning under the weight of these clunky, horrible, unusable machines that were supposedly built to mil-spec whatever, and you could drop on a tank and the tank would come off worse and all this kind of nonsense. And this guy was saying, "Oh, my customers, big grown-up people, they wear uniforms, they'll never buy this trivial Windows 95 thing."
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm looking at the world, and I'm reflecting on the conversations that I'd had literally in the space of just a few weeks with the people who were becoming my customers, and I thought, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I always thought that in like MOD and other defence, I've been to some trade shows, and you always think that, okay, the things that have come out flashy, like AI now, the usability of the generative AI, you've had AI and other technologies with defence for years, and I saw an article saying that some of the technology we've got now comes from funded projects that are inside different defence agencies around the world, and this sort of trickles down a bit.
To an extent.
Do you think that's sort of swapping now, and this other companies are a bit more advanced?
So
it's probably gone a little bit off topic. But,
well, no, it relates. So the days when the military was the source of esoteric technology that may or may not trickle out into the civilian environment, and the days in which the notion of military meant more expensive than you could possibly imagine, more capable, that's gone. And that's in these areas of art. In some areas of art, not so. There are clearly exceptions, so I'm not going to go too far with this point. But certainly insofar as the raw, if you like, compute, insofar as the raw cybery stuff is concerned, GPS is probably the last technology that was developed exclusively for military use that was then. Okay. So now it is almost invariably the case, and I won't stretch the point to absolute exhaustion, but almost invariably the case, that the military buy the commercially available stuff. And the lesson is finally, maybe, hopefully beginning to be learned, that modifying it, customizing it, the commercially available stuff, in the name of supposed defense exceptionalism is a really dumb thing to do. And this is the angle through which it arcs back to your original question. So the Windows revolution occurred. On the face of it, that was the death knell to the old computing model. So the old companies that made money out of this old model, well, on the face of it, they were finished. Because their model presupposed that they had expertise and capability that the customer needed to rely upon, that this was too complex, and you needed my Unix expert and so on. You didn't buy my computer, you rented it, and so forth. So these companies, quite successfully initially at least, who became the large-scale systems integrators and quote-unquote the service providers, they grappled this new technology into a model that made sense to them, which meant a model they could make money from.
Yeah.
So they would turn around to customers and say, and I'm paraphrasing for the sake of making the point, but they would turn around to customers and say, oh, this Windows technology, it's not good enough for you. In its raw form, you're special, you're defense. I need to modify this for you. I need to tweak it and customize it to make it good enough for you. And we can't update this because that might be dangerous and that might break things. So we're going to have to test these patches to exhaustion. And that just happens to be a charging episode, which we built into the contract. And you only get 3 of those a year. So we ended up with systems, for instance, and I'm not joking here, where a patch was a charging episode. You only had 3 built into the contract.
Yeah.
And therefore, once you reach 3 patches in a 12-month period, you were going to pay more. Oh, and by the way, we couldn't use the standard Microsoft mechanism of patching, so we rolled our own specially for you. And now we're going to have to charge you to wrap this patch in our patching system so we can roll it out, notwithstanding the fact that this capability exists in the micro. So why does the MOD need secure by design?
Yeah.
Because you can see how this system didn't exactly work from the customer's point of view. It looked like it worked from the point of view of some of these systems integrated service providers.
Yeah.
Okay, for a short-ish period of time in the cosmic scheme of things it did. Okay, how many of them exist today? Where have they all gone? Why is that? Because you end up in a situation where this old model produced ancient, archaic systems. Windows minus N, or N minus rather, where the minus is really quite large, and the age of the system is itself a vulnerability because it's been procured and secured allegedly, and according to this old model. So why does the MOD need this new model? Because there's absolutely no way the MOD can operate in the 21st century using these old systems procured in the old ways, designed in the old ways, operated in the old ways, managed and provisioned in the old ways. The MOD needs a phenomenally more agile, responsive, dynamic mechanism for gaining the confidence that the systems upon which it depends are doing what they're designed to do, what they're intended to do.
That pretty much covers my point of, I was going to ask about why it's such a priority for the MOD at the moment, secure by design. So what happens when you don't design securely? And, well, from the start, when you don't design securely from the start, what?
If you don't deploy the principles of secure by design, you end up with brittle systems, you end up with fragile systems, you end up with systems that fail to exhibit the requisite characteristics of resilience, you end up with systems that do not give you the confidence that you need that they do what you want them to do, when you want them to do it, and how you want them to do it. You end up with systems that are, and this goes to your earlier point about isn't there a cost overhead in this, you end up with systems that are vastly more expensive to manage and maintain than they ever should have been in the first place. So to the extent that you might think that not thinking about this at the start represents some kind of shortcut, oh boy, any penny that you save here is going to cost you thousands upon thousands downstream, because you're going to end up with a bag of spanners that you can't maintain, you can't manage, you can't evolve, you can't develop a system which is locked in stasis. And if we know anything about computing and the world, it's that it advances really rather quickly. You know, the news this week, we've been hearing reports of and discussions around the end of the conventional search engine. People's interaction with these computers, or rather with the information, the world of information, this is changing phenomenally.
You're sort of just asking your phone now for most answers. Yeah, don't you have to type on there? So to what extent then is this just an MOD initiative? Is it just MOD focused, secure by design, or does it?
No, not at all. MOD are ahead of the pack insofar as the pack is central government.
Okay.
The Cabinet Office are also to use the politician's phrase, working hard.
Okay.
Around secure by design. Other departments similarly, NATO similarly is looking at this with some degree of interest. So no, it's absolutely not an MOD only initiative. A great deal of work and thought is being put into the development and the application of secure by design principles elsewhere across government for exactly the same reasons.
Okay.
Now, the MOD's operations are particular and do have certain unique characteristics, but all enterprises of the state or of society or of commerce have their goal, their purpose, the reasons for their existence. All enterprises have suffered from the inertia and the brittleness and the fragility of the old model of computing. And all of them have suffered from the extent to which the old methods of contracting reciprocated with the accreditation model, reciprocated with the project management model, reciprocated with the prints model. And so you can see how all of this gels together. So it doesn't matter actually, ultimately, whether you're in the public sector, the private sector, whatever. All enterprises who've had to deploy this enterprise model of computing, which is all enterprises, are fundamentally in the same space. And therefore, this is arguably, although you can argue that none of this is new, all of this we should have been doing before, all of this is actually just the practice of cybersecurity as we've been talking. All of that notwithstanding, this is arguably the biggest shift in at least a generation. If one were to think that it would be possible to practice cybersecurity, and let's keep calling it security because that's what people know, in the old way, as in ticking boxes, going through checklists, effectively running scripts, taking controls and sticking them on things in a relatively arbitrary and undifferentiated way, well, that's kind of a fool's paradise.
Okay.
That's not viable.
You come to a point where the cracks will start to show and you'll be forced to...
Absolutely. So in that sense, the practice of cybersecurity becomes more like the profession we've said we want it to be for as long as I can remember. And it becomes more, if you like, broadly speaking, more comparable to the practice of medicine, where you're looking at the operation of complex systems, in our case, complex interconnected systems, in a world, therefore dynamic and agile environments, therefore a model of ensuring the good operation, good behavior of these systems, which makes sense in the context of complex interconnected systems operating in a complex interconnected world with all that connotes.
So this is not just about protecting networks, this is protecting...
Absolutely not.
People, and going back to the MOD side of things, would be people and the missions as well.
It's about protecting outcomes. Systems exist for a purpose. That purpose is to deliver an effect of some form. Depends on the nature of the system. It depends on the nature of the whatever. So systems do not exist for their own purpose. So in as much as secure by design is about making sure the system does what you want it to do, and in as much as people are an integral part of that system, well then yes, it's about protecting that system and those people. But then those systems have effect. They generate effect in the world. That effect, the mission or the business outcome or whatever it might be. Part of that effect may itself be to protect people. The purpose of some of these systems is to protect in some cases. So in all of those senses, secure by design is about designing, building, maintaining, operating, governing, regulating, scrutinizing, whatever, the operation of systems in the world in such a way that they deliver the effect in the world.
It just hurts my brain, but thinking that, to me, I thought those kind of things would be standard. As soon as computers started coming in, that would have been just standard. Everyone would have done it.
Should have
but
been.
It sounds like it's only just come in recently, whereas it sounds archaic what we were doing beforehand. And now it's like, well, yeah, in my mind, I was like, oh, this was all done all the time. Everyone would have done this.
Yeah, but it wasn't. So I'll give you an example. And this sounds absurd, but it's a real example. So back in the day, part of the accreditation modality was we had a series of certification programs. So you would take your product and you would submit it for a certification, and you'd write your targeted evaluation. So the last iteration of all of that, which people will be generally familiar with, common criteria. So the US government had what became a sequence of rainbow books, and these were tightly prescribed specifications for the security characteristics of different kinds of systems, and each of these books had a different color, and they became known as the rainbow books. This kind of iterated forward into a harmonized, unified set of things called the common criteria. Well, ITSEC was also part of that same world. So this was rules-based. This was specification-based, not system-based, not output-based. Microsoft at one point put the Windows NT 351 operating system through common criteria because they had to. Because the federal government said, we're not going to buy it. This was common practice. Government said, we're not going to buy this thing unless it's gone through common criteria or whatever. So the target of evaluation was written. The target of evaluation was specific to a particular hardware platform. A particular computer. I think it was a Dell. The instant you installed the operating system on a different hardware platform, you invalidated the certification. But everybody pretended that didn't matter.
Right.
That's not the worst of it. The worst of it was that the evaluation of this client operating system, which has no function in life other than to be a client to a Windows server, was only ever evaluated in standalone mode. The target of evaluation did not include its connection to the network. The instant you plugged a network connection into the back of the computer upon which it was installed, you invalidated the certification.
Right.
And everybody pretended that wasn't the case. Nobody ever read the target of evaluation, so that's maybe why. So then the idea, as a corollary of that, emerged that if you, and this was given to me as an axiomatic principle by somebody who really should have known better. If I build a system comprised of these assured components, well, I've got an assured system. No, you haven't, because that's not the way systems work.
No.
You're right, we should have been thinking differently all along. We haven't. So in a sense, what Secure by, and this is perhaps not a tremendously popular view, but in a sense what Secure by Design has done is say, yep, the emperor has no clothes and hasn't had for some considerable period of time. And there's no doubt that this will cause some discomfort to you. Because there is no doubt that this will, in the old model, you would take a set of controls and you'd stick them on at the start of the exercise, regardless. Secure by Design doesn't do that. Secure by Design is not about the controls. It's about the process that you go through to reach a decision at the end of which you make discriminations about controls. It's about enabling you to say to somebody else, why did you choose that? What effect do you think that was giving you? Why do you think that effect was worthwhile? And what are you doing to make sure that that continues to deliver the effect that you wanted it to? And what are you doing to make sure that the effect that you legitimately identified as desirable here continues to be desirable here?
Okay. So on a real MOD program or project, what does this look like to do Secure by Design right or well?
The biggest challenge to getting this whole thing in place is cultural.
Right, okay.
It's not technical. It's not financial. It's not contractual. They are all dimensions of the problematic, but the biggest challenge is cultural. So, because of the prior world, there has been more than a tendency to compartmentalize security and the consideration of security.
Okay.
So, belongs over here. The security twonks sit in this space over here. Don't bother us. We'll call you, brackets, never. The people who run the enterprise or are responsible for the capability or depend upon the, I sit over here. and the contractual people sit, the procurement people sit over here. Because of the way the world worked, the whole security thing, not only was it compartmentalized, and often that was done organizationally, structurally, institutionally. Here's the security department, they sit in their own little world and we wall them off and we don't let them out. Not uncommon. But it was also compartmentalized in the sense that, okay, security means the certificate of accreditation, which is the certificate of absolution, which means once I've got that, that's job done. I don't have to worry about that. Okay. This entire culture has to change in order for Secure by Design to become operable in the way it needs to become for all the reasons we've discussed. So let's focus on the word responsible. Because what Secure by Design does is it foregrounds both the responsibility for enacting its principles and also the critical, pivotal accountability. So in the old days, let's say I was a director of a company and the company had a contract with the MOD. Yeah. And I'm part of the controlling mind of the company. So, my neck's on the block as far as a whole load of statutory obligation is concerned and so on and so forth. I've now got a contract from the MOD. The contract has some requirements. This is quite scary. It's national security. It's classified data. It's MOD stuff. I've got the certificate of accreditation. Whoopee! I'm now absolved. Job done. Okay. It goes wrong. Not my fault. Not my problem. I've got the certificate of accreditation. In this new world of Secure by Design, I'm going to have to be the one who says, yes, I am satisfied. That system is capable. That system does what is necessary. That system is protected in a way that makes sense. I am now signing this system off into service.
Rather just on that little certificate piece of paper.
That's a huge cultural change. Right. I'm a director of a company. I'm not a security twonk. I'm not a systems architect. I'm not a governance specialist. I wouldn't know one end of the NIST framework from the other if it said hello to me first thing in the morning. So what do? Well, I do exactly the same thing as I would do as the controlling mind of a company in any other area of art where I am accountable, but I don't necessarily have the skills, knowledge, experience. I would assemble the people who do. Yeah. And I would gather together those people who are possessed of the skills, knowledge, and experience, and I would say, right, we have now got to build a system that does this, this, and this. I'm going to be required to sign off on this system and send it into operation. What do I need to do? You know about this. What do I need to do? Part of our cultural problem is that in some cases, the people who practice security haven't actually been practicing security. They've been practicing compliance with the accreditation model. Not in all cases, but in some cases. So this is another dimension to the cultural change. Those people are now going to be called, as it were, around the table and ask questions that they are then going to be held accountable for the answers. As in, I signed this off into service. You told me that X, Y, and Z was good enough. It turned out X, Y, and Z wasn't good enough. Yeah. You're not very good, are you?
Do you think it's the change is going to happen quite soon, or it's going to? You see lots of in the news, different articles about different companies sort of getting hacked or certain systems failing. Do you think more publicity about the negatives happening will enforce that change, or is it more of a generational one? Where on our last podcast, it was more about the decision makers at the top of a certain generation, and it's when the younger generation are coming through, they're expecting it to be like, well, why aren't we doing this? We should have been doing it all along, and then they'll implement it, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, but I think the examples that you point to are illustrative. So let's look at this in general terms. Okay. We've had several instances recently where very, very, very reputable companies have fallen victim to ransomware. The attacks, in all probability, have not been perpetrated by highly sophisticated adversaries.
Okay, there's more chances, basically, then.
Well, kids, opportunists, people buying the tool sets from dark websites. Okay. So we have a situation, self-evidently, where, let's say, for the sake of the argument, a bunch of kids have perpetrated demonstrably successful attacks with considerable financial gain against a growing number of high-profile targets. Each of those systems belong to a highly reputable organization. Each of those systems will have employed cybersecurity professionals. Each of those systems, one assumes, will have been through whatever certification, cybersecurity essentials plus whatever, and maybe, whatever else.
Yeah.
How has it come to pass that these systems have been breached? How can you be notionally compliant with quote-unquote best practice? How can you be quote-unquote accredited, perhaps in this case with a small a? How can you have ticked all of those industry standard boxes and yet fall victim to an attack perpetrated by a bunch of kids? Not once,
multiple times,
but several instances of this. Something is deeply wrong at the fundamental level. Now, if the answer is, it comes in through the human factor and it's blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, that tells me that neither you nor the orthodoxies that we've practiced have understood the nature of the systems that we're dealing with properly. Because if you think, this goes back to your point about the cyber, and this goes back to this cultural change thing, if you think that the system you're protecting is reducible to the tin and wire and the software and the binaries, you demonstrably do not understand the system you're protecting. If you think that the humans sit over here, and if the humans aren't part of the design of your security architecture, secure by design, if you're not factoring the human behaviors in, if you're not factoring in the ways in which your adversary might attempt to breach your system through the human component, well, then you haven't secured your system, have you? Because you don't understand your system. So there are multiple cultural changes here.
Okay.
And it would be a mistake to underestimate them. But by the same token, take the examples that you've just given. Marks and Spencers were sent a letter by a parliamentary committee. It's on the web.
Yeah.
That letter, I think, is a watershed, potentially. Because that letter, first of all, the tone of the letter is such that Marks and Spencers, in the tonality of that letter, are not the victim. The parliamentary committee is inviting Marks and Spencers to account for and to explain themselves. And the underlying tone is, how did this happen?
Yeah.
What did you do to protect your systems from precisely this? Why did you think that was good enough to protect them from precisely this? And what have you now got to say for yourself in the context of the fact that clearly whatever you did wasn't good enough? Now, that's quite a change.
Yeah.
Secure by design is precisely about
asking those questions at the start.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Trying to think of what we haven't covered now on topic 3. What does it actually look like to do this well on a real MOD program?
Okay. So this is a perfect opportunity to talk about, again, the negative, as in what it doesn't look like.
Okay.
So there is an idea abroad in the world that secure by design is the registration of your system on some MOD tool. There are various tools, and the people who are watching this familiar with those tools will know what they are. And the idea is that the mistaken idea is that if you register your system using one of these tools, you've done by secure by design. Or if you fill in the spreadsheet that you have to fill in to register on one of these systems, you've done secure by design.
Okay.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Those tools are merely a mechanism for registering the system in instances where you need to. Okay. And not every system will need to be registered. And in any case, that spreadsheet, that monstrous spreadsheet, which goes along with one of these registration episodes, that's kind of a handrail. Okay. Because the applicability, this goes back to the fallacy, the mistaken notion that you conflate secure by design with the application of controls, and that if you take these controls and you apply them to a system, or you evidence the whatever, then you've done secure by. No, you haven't. Secure by design is about the process that you go through in order to arrive at the decisions that you need to arrive at in order to select the controls that are appropriate, blah, 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 blah. So it's perfectly possible to maybe have a system that you wish to register where you run through the controls and say, well, actually, none of these make sense in that horrible spreadsheet. None of these make sense in the context of the thing I'm looking at. What makes sense in the context of the thing I'm looking at is the stuff that I've talked about, deliberated upon, discussed, documented here, but I'm still going to register the system. So secure by design is not about using a tool set. It's not about filling in a spreadsheet for the sake of filling in the spreadsheet. It's about, to quote Christine Maxwell, doing the work, going through this process, implementing those principles in a way that makes sense according to the context within which you're operating. Who determines whether or not it makes sense in the context within which you're operating? The controlling mind, in exactly the same way as it does in any other business, operational, or enterprise context. And therefore somebody at the end of the proverbial day is accountable for those decisions, those discriminations, those choices. So secure by design is not something you do with tools.
Okay.
It's not something you do with documents. It's not something you do with spreadsheets. You can fill in as many templates as you like.
Okay.
And you're still not necessarily going to have done secure by design. I mean, it might be worth dwelling on the reflection that increasingly and more generally, I suspect that the word security is going to drop out of our collective vocabulary for the reasons that we've discussed, because it connotes this reliance upon confidentiality, this reduction of our compass of concern to confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and then to a very narrow interpretation of those. So I think, I mean, if you look at it here in terms of our office, plastered on the wall as you walk in, is the word resilience.
Yeah.
That's there, literally.
So
the writing on the wall.
So do you feel at some point secure by design will change to resilience by design when security is...
The name may or may not change, but the practice, in practice, it will be about resilience.
Yeah.
And resilience broadly conceptualized as in the capacity of the system to perform its intended functions in the face of either adversarial actions and or perturbations in the environment, internal or external.
Is this now a must-have across the MOD, or are we still early in adopting?
Both. Accreditation is gone. Accreditation is dead. Accreditation is not coming back. There are no more certificates of absolution to be issued.
Okay.
It's not going to happen unless, of course, there's a revolution in the palace and we go back to the old world, but I can't easily see how that would happen. There are innumerable old systems, legacy systems that are operating under the old accreditation model, under contracts that were constructed, and they're just going to cycle out. Right. And there will be a period.
It's a matter of time, basically,
where there's grit in the mill. But insofar as the new stuff coming on board is concerned, you're going to have to do secure by design because you haven't got anywhere else to go. You can't go through the accreditation methodology. And so here's the thing. So in level 2, there is this provision for an episode of scrutiny where the MOD centre might come visit, might come say, show me, tell me, demonstrate. That provision's there. Now, that's not accreditation in the old model in any way, shape or form. It's, if you like... because this capacity for a visit of scrutiny exists for both systems within the MOD and systems outside the MOD that are under their jurisdiction. So you're a contractor, you build a system, it's under contract, you do things for the MOD. They have the ability to come and look at it. Okay. Quite right too.
Yeah.
As a company, we have contracts, subcontracts. We have the right to go and look at the contractor. That's right of audit. That's fine. Okay, so the MOD pitch up, let's say, at some hypothetical point in the future, and they say, excellent, we want to see the evidence of your implementation of secure by design. Ah, yes, boss. Here's the email that I sent with the spreadsheet, and here's the confirmation that we entered the spreadsheet on the system, and that's us done secure by design, isn't it? Can I have a gold star, please? No. Well, I registered, yes. So how did you implement? Well, no. How did you implement? Oh, so you haven't got any of that. Oh, you didn't do any of that. Right. How did you know what controls to apply? Well, we just took the ones out of the spreadsheet and stuck them on everything. Really? Are you an idiot? Why did you do that? So you've got no idea, therefore, why what you've done in any way, shape or form protects the information that I've entrusted to you. Well, I'm not now filled with confidence about your ability to be a trustworthy partner, am I?
No.
So you don't have a security management board, no. So you're the controlling mind of the company, and you're responsible for attesting to us, your relying party, that you are capable of delivering the obligations that you have freely entered into under this contract with us, and you've got no idea about the ongoing management. No. Oh, no, not exactly.
Filled with confidence.
No, precisely. So in whether this penny's dropped or not, in that sense, there is no choice. And if you don't do the stuff that we've been talking about for the last hour or so, and you get this apocryphal visit, and you can't show that you've done this and that you're doing this, and it's baked into the core fabric of what you do,
sort of caught with your pants down.
It's an uncomfortable conversation.
Okay.
Because in the old days, it was easy. What have you done to protect the system? Who cares? I've got my certificate of absolution. You gave it to me. You go away, talk to your creditor. Not my problem. Off you go.
Right.
Gone.
What does the future of secure by design in the digital world look like? Now, with technology is growing faster and faster and faster. Things are getting smaller. Things are getting more powerful. That means not just on our side and the MOD side, the technology is getting better and faster, but also on the other side with the bad actors, their technology and in the digital world is getting better.
I think it's not so much the future of secure by design. I think it's the future of systems. So go back to this point that cyber is a socio-technical system in which human and non-human agents operate with, if you like, equivalent agency in highly interconnected, phenomenally complex systems. Okay. So everything kind of derives from the nature of those systems. Okay. So insofar as we know anything about the future of the nature of these systems, well, we know that they're going to become more complex.
Yeah.
We know that they're going to become more interconnected. We know that the extent to which we can function societally or individually without these systems is already minimal, perhaps to the point of non-existence, but it's going to, in other words, take these systems away and we cease to operate individually or societally. We know also that the balance of agency in these systems between human and non-human agents is going to change phenomenally. In other words, non-human agents are going to do more and more and more. You notice I'm not using the phrase artificial intelligence.
I was going to say we can't I can't do an episode without like sort of a sprinkle of artificial intelligence. So it seems to be everywhere at the moment.
So AI is another. Okay, so we could do another podcast on AI. AI is the most awful term possible to describe the phenomenon that we're looking at. The phenomenon that we're looking at is non-human agents performing the functions of human cognition and perception, and increasingly performing the functions of human cognition and perception and some form of kinetic effect in the world. Environment. So what we know for sure is that the extent to which non-human agents perform cognitive perceptual functions that we consider to be the exclusive preserve of humans, well, that's increasing. In other words, these agents are becoming more and more and more and more capable. Okay. What this means in broad terms for the resilience of the systems, that highly complex, highly interconnected systems upon which what that means is we have to use non-human agency way more than we currently do.
Right, okay, so we have to embrace it.
Yes, absolutely. It's already the case and has been, end of the Second World War, 1945. The only effective defence that the British had against the V1, which was itself a recognisably modern cruise missile. It was called a robot bomb at the time, pilotless, autonomous weapon. Crude, but effective, well-ish. The only effective defence that the British had was an almost entirely automated computer-controlled anti-aircraft system. Radar self-tracked. A computer calculated the trajectory. The information that the computer calculated, electromechanical computer, the information the computer calculated went down a wire to the guns, which self-aimed and self-fired, self-actuated. The system had British components, but it was assembled as a system, designed as a system in America. Churchill put in a personal request for a shipment of a large quantity of these systems to combat the V1 threat.
Yeah.
The Americans sent the shipment as requested, along with a bunch of trainers whose job was to eject the human from the loop. The British had insisted on a human being in the loop because the squaddy could do better than the robot. Wasn't true. In that time, so this is the end of the Second World War, it was already the case that the human in the loop degraded the capability of the system. The only way that system became effective enough to combat the pilotless aircraft was the human accepted their place as a subordinate, relatively minor player in the system. If that was true then...
Yeah, that's why you're talking about the Second World War there, where a lot of people now think that AI is a brand new thing that's just come out and it's only just started. And I've gone to, I think it was DSET about 3 years ago, and the speaker said that AI has been around for ages. It's only just... It comes in waves where, it gets a bit popular in the public eye, and then it fades away a bit. But now it seems to be everywhere.
The paper that constitutes the birth certificate of artificial computational neural networks, that paper was written in the early 1940s. The idea of computers replacing, augmenting, supplementing human cognitive and perceptual capabilities. Alan Turing was talking about that at Bletchley Park to his mate Jack Good.
There you go. A little bit of a history lesson as well.
This is really not new at all.
No.
So, in order to ensure that these systems that we're now talking about operate in the way that whoever wants them to operate, there is absolutely no choice.
You have to involve it more and more.
Yes.
It was sort of, I was thinking whether as a company, should we, you've got a whole movement of everyone's now using AI and using AI in everything and just so they don't seem like they're behind. But then you've got another angle where you can say, well, we don't use AI, we still have the human touch and sort of,
in some areas,
share your data with AI. You don't know what it's going to do, but we are like on the block. We sort of have the people that we don't use the AI, and you can trust us because we're people. Do you think it needs to be a combination of that rather than?
Of course.
So I always thought that it would be like a plus if we said that we didn't use AI, but now it seems like you sort of would be behind the curve slightly if you don't use or harness AI for certain tasks. There's certain things that you don't really need to use AI for.
It depends on the nature of the system.
Okay.
If you imagine that you can design a system which will exhibit the requisite characteristics of resilience in a real world context without factoring in non-human agency and making use of non-human agency. If you think you can build that kind of system in the context of the world as it now is, to repeat a phrase I used earlier, you're living in a fool's paradise. Okay. You cannot. Now, the purposes to which you put that system, the human purposes to which you might put that system, the human needs that system might satisfy, well, that's a different conversation. So there is something here about the way in which we think about the nature and the operation and therefore the design of these systems, which needs to fundamentally shift. And that fundamental shift needs to be based on an interrogation of the idea, a deconstruction of the idea that you must always, in all instances, have a human in or on the loop, because in ever so many instances, in precisely the most critical dimensions of the system that you could really, 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 really care the most about, having a human on or in the loop is the worst thing you could possibly do. And that's a challenge.
My last one then is, if somebody is thinking, I want to bring the mindset into my program of Secure by Design into my program, where should they start?
At the top of the organization.
Okay.
They should start by having deep and meaningful and potentially uncomfortable conversations with the people who control the enterprise, or the bit of the enterprise that's responsible for the capability, and going through a process of education with those people, which has at its heart the cultural transformation that we've been talking about. If the people at the head of the shed don't get the fundamental change that this involves, probably to the way in which their enterprise is governed and managed and so on and so forth, then nothing else will happen of any meaning. So one of the ways in which one of the ways in which the implementation of Secure by Design can be characterized is, if at the end of your SPD journey, your internal governance structures, not just as far as cyber is concerned, but governance structures overall, corporate governance structures, if those governance structures look the same as they did at the start, you have not done it right.
Right, okay.
You have failed. How should they look? Well, that's going to depend on who you are and what you do and the kind of things that you build and rely on. So, given where we are in this Secure by Design transition, and given where most enterprises are in their SPD journey, this conversation needs to start with those people who have jurisdiction over and responsibility for and accountability for the design and the operation of the governance structures, the corporate governance structures of their enterprise. Therefore, you don't start with the security bods necessarily. You don't start with the techies necessarily. You don't even necessarily start with the governance, risk and compliance people. You start at the head of the shed.
Okay. That's it for my questions.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing your knowledge and saying yes to actually coming on. And bit about you, I saw that you've had a couple of talks, or you've held talks, and you've got another one coming up soon. Do you want to?
I have. It is for the Royal Signals Institution. It is in Blandford. I need to check the venue. Anyway, it's in September. It's an evening talk, and it draws on the work that I did for my doctorate.
Okay.
So it draws on the historical dimension to, well, actually, some of the stuff that we've been talking about today. So it draws on the history of artificial intelligence, the shapes that took in the early periods of its emergence, and then it considers what that might possibly tell us about not just the nature of the present, but also the possible directions that the future might, the future trajectory of these things might take. So, not so much an exercise in prediction, as in futurology, as in things will go in there, but rather
what could.
Yeah, a spectrum of contingency, with a degree of specificity around given the nature of the audience and the fact that it's for the Royal Signals, a degree of specificity around the broadly speaking, the military applications of all of this. So there's a dimension of that which is about autonomous systems, the human agency in systems that the military might use or might rely on, and then really something about, to your point actually, something about the role of humans, us, in shaping the future. In other words, to cut to the chase, the future is not determined for us. Still less is it determined for us by the nature of the technology. Okay. The shape of the future, the pathways that it takes, are the pathways that we take. And those pathways, within limits, of course, but those pathways are consequences of choices and decisions that we make. So therefore, we do have agency. So I'll set out a range of contingencies, but which direction we go in, well, that's up to us.
Sounds good. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it.
And thank you for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, we're trying to set up Apple Music podcast. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. If you're on YouTube, ring the bell so you get a notification every time we upload any new videos. And I think the next topic will be more of a training focused episode. So thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.